Hello, and you're very welcome to Kicking Match. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and this is a weekly podcast all about the Irish League, a league which never disappoints in stirring up talking points for us all to sink our teeth into. As the new era at Glentoran started this week with Roddy McAree taking on the East Belfast hot seat, his first assignment being the less than toasty arena of the Newry Showgrounds. The Blues convincingly won as all their title rivals drew, and Portadown didn't get the 3 points back as their appeal against the NIFL decision to award Newry a 3-0 victory in December is dismissed by the Irish FA. And guess what? They could have really done with those points. I go straight to the man in the know to get the inside track on the whole situation. I think I'm prepared to say that January is one of my favourite periods in the Irish League calendar. It's just so much fun. Yes, you're playing Russian roulette with the game you actually want to go to going ahead due to some pitch-related drama that we've seen quite a lot. And then if you actually do get to the game, you're lucky if you leave with all your fingers intact due to just how unbearably cold it is. But despite all that, what we do have is an incredible amount of stuff to talk about. This is a week where the games feel like they're second fiddle to a lot of the other things that have happened this week, and I've got a great person that will help me go through all these topics. I'm really excited to bring them back. But before I do that, massive thank you to all those who supported the pod last week. Got some lovely feedback, lots of new listeners as well. If you're fairly fresh to this, I think you're in for a treat this week. If you haven't checked out our retrospective on the life and times of Mick McDermott as Glentoran manager, you can go check that out from last week. It was brilliant, and of course we'll look into that as well. But this week I get to welcome back one of the godfathers of Irish League podcasting. The kettle's on, the fire's burning for sports journalist from the Belfast Telegraph, Keith Bailie. Busy week, Keith.
It has been just a wee bit. It's been a busy 10 days or so. I'm just out of the Belfast Telegraph office. I haven't been working on the Portadown story. I'm on a few other things. So it has been a busy week.
We'll jump right into that. That's been the big one that came out on Monday. You have been connected to the story from the very beginning. Give us very briefly the timeline. The headline is Portadown have lost their appeal and they don't particularly agree with it.
No, they don't, and that's fair enough. Such as their prerogative. It's been quite, the whole thing is a massive shame because these sort of cases are really bad for Irish League football, for football in Northern Ireland in general, because it reaches way down the levels. It's not just the top flight. This is the one we talk about, but Knockbreda lost 3 points for a really good win away to Newton only a few days ago, and there's another case coming up in the PIL. So it's not great. It doesn't reflect well on football in this country. If we want to talk about the Portadown issue to kick things off, let's take it back to the very start. I think that's maybe for the best because it is quite a complex case, and I absolutely don't blame anyone who kind of shrugs their shoulders at it or just thinks this is crazy. Why not have Portadown lost the points? Because on the face of things, it's a very minor mistake. Do you know what? Not even on the face of things, it was a minor mistake. Let's take it way back. First weekend in December, it was a Sunday. Portadown were away to Newry City, a game they won 3-1. But before that game, they have to submit a team sheet. Everyone submits their team sheet 90 minutes before kick-off. On that team sheet, they included the player Alberto Bailie, really good young player, Dominican Republic international, I believe. Problem was, he wasn't there. He wasn't in the Newry Showgrounds at the time. Portadown say he was sick. I'm sure that's correct. But whatever, he was late. He didn't get there until 10 minutes before kickoff. When Portadown realised he was going to be late, they removed him from the team sheet and they put Leo Donnellan. And he started the game. Leo Donnellan gets injured, I believe, 24 minutes into the match. Who comes on? Alberto Bailie. And he plays the rest of the game. Portadown go and win 3-1. And you're at home and you're going, if you haven't heard anything about this case, you're going, well, what on earth's wrong with that? Well, Portadown fell foul of quite a niche role. I say niche role. I mean, it's there. I mean, it's well known to football administrators, but I wouldn't necessarily expect your average fan to know about it. It's Rule 20H. I couldn't quote it verbatim, but the upshot of it is you're only allowed to remove somebody from the team sheet if they've been incapacitated. Also, and this becomes quite important later on, you also have to inform the opposition of your intention to change the team shape. So Bailie taken out of the team, onto the subs bench, brought on. Problem, because he was brought on, the implication of that is he isn't incapacitated, because how can you be incapacitated if you successfully play, even 1 minute of the game? But in this instance, I think it was about an hour a bit of the game. And that would tell you that he wasn't incapacitated, and therefore Portadown broke Rule 20H. It was the day that England, I believe, beat Senegal in the World Cup, and I was sitting at home having quite a quiet afternoon, thinking that my main work thing that I was going to have to do was, post up a report on the England game from Qatar. And I got a phone call from Ardette saying they got word of this story, and I seem to have gained a reputation, I don't know why, for writing these stories. So they asked me to look into it, and my first reaction was, nah, there's nothing to this. This is small beer. And the first couple of conversations I had with sources, and multiple sources, was I started off like, don't know, there's nothing to this. Then it became, well, there's an issue of sport integrity here. And then it quickly sort of dawned on me later, and probably not even after we published the first story, that it could really be an eligibility issue, because if he's incapacitated and he came on and the rule says you're not allowed to play, if you're not allowed to be taken out of the team if you're incapacitated, then you play, and that implies he's incapacitated, and that implies that he's ineligible to play in that game. So it's a very unique one. Like, quite often these are very straightforward, and whatever anybody tries to tell you at Glentoran, the Joe Crow one last year was straightforward. I heard about that the way home from a different game, and I knew straight away that Glentoran were going to get kicked out of the Irish Cup. There's no two ways about it. This one was much more complicated, and right up until today, I didn't know what way it would go on the appeal. But anyway, at that point, to pick it up where we left off on the Sunday night, I phoned just before they published the article. I called Portadown for comment, and I called NIFL for a comment, and NIFL said that, and Newry for comment as well. And NIFL said at that point that they'd be investigating the issue. Then on, I believe it was Friday that week, NIFL announced that Portadown would be result of the game would be a 3-0 win to Newry City and a £500 fine for Portadown. And like a lot of people, I was quite surprised, because, with let's say the Joe Crow one, there's a rule there that if you've committed, like if you played a suspended player, Joe Crow was an Irish Cup game, so it's slightly different, but let's for sake of argument say it was a league game. If you played a suspended player and an eligible player, it's black and white. It's a 3-0 the opposition. This one, is a little bit more complex. There wasn't a rule within 20H that says if you break 20H, then it's 3-0 to the opposition. But NIFL obviously, it's a competitions committee, put a bit of work into it, looked into the rules and interpreted the rules in a way that led to where we are now. Portadown appealed, as you'd expect, as is their right, as is absolutely any club in the country would do. No criticism there. And it went to appeal. It was heard by the IFA's appeals committee. And what's different? The NIFL competitions committee is made up of members of the clubs. So you would have representatives, not of every club, but there's a Bithmil representative, an institute representative, and a couple of others on there who would deal with that. And the IFA appeals committee is different because they're independent. And you've got, I was going to say a QC, of course it's KC, a King's Council on there. Martin Wolf, his name is. So that, that's there deliberately to bring a little bit more rigor to it, a little independence. People who aren't connected to any clubs or the leagues. So it's quite a robust system. Actually, people criticise it, and I think it's probably as good as you can do, really, in the circumstances. And they looked into it, and do you know what? I thought they'll probably stick with what NIFL decided. The hearing was on Monday night. I thought the report will land Wednesday, and it didn't. It didn't land Thursday or Friday, and then I'm like, Portadown have got a real chance here. Portadown must have, because this is obviously a complex one if it's taken them all week. Because they had 7 days and they used the full 7 days. But then it landed Monday lunchtime. And there it was. Portadown's appeal was dismissed. So a really big blow for Portadown. It's curious. Do you want to dig into the details of it? Because it's pretty interesting,
Well, there's lots of questions from fans that I've seen, and you're absolutely right, it is complicated. And when we looked here on the podcast around the original decision to remove the points from Portadown, I went through the law and tried to figure out what decision has been made here, what aspect of it has been broken. Before we get into that, from your experience covering the game, is there any kind of precedent that you can look upon and go, this is very similar to case X? Because around the time, a lot of people were pointing to this case relating to a game with Institute the season before, but people didn't see a lot of similarities between that. The Joe Crow one, which is brought up, that was a suspension issue. This is really clouded. It's quite foggy in regards to what exactly was broken. From your view, is there a clear line where it feels as though that's the line that's been crossed and that's why the win has been removed from Portadown?
You say it's foggy, and I understand why, but like, to me, the rule 20H is not foggy. Portadown broke it on 2 counts because they played a player who wasn't incapacitated. That was my interpretation of it from day one. How can you be incapacitated if you played over an hour of the game? There's a second element to that of you also, if you make a change, you have to inform the opposition, and Newry have maintained throughout that they were not informed. Now, Portadown disagree with that, and we'll dig into that because it's quite interesting. But that's a rule that was broken. Whether or not that leads on to losing 3 points or not is up for debate. But curiously, wasn't as big a part of the appeal as I thought it might have been. Portadown's appeal, stood on. It was really a 3-pronged attack. Point number 1. Portadown were argued that he was incapacitated, that Alberto Balde was ill and he was late for the game because he was sick the night before. He slept in, therefore was late for the game. He also thought it was a 3 o'clock kickoff, but those things combined made him late for the game, and therefore he was incapacitated. But at the time, so they can make that decision. But when it came, by the time we're 25 minutes into the game, by that point he was feeling a bit better. On he comes, and he isn't incapacitated anymore. And the appeals committee just didn't agree that was possible, and they viewed it as the way I described it earlier. We said if you play any part of the game, then surely you're not really incapacitated. So that was where one of Portadown's arguments fell on. The second part is the Newry, did they tell Newry or not? Now, and actually, this doesn't really. Once the first part is proved, then this isn't as relevant anymore, because you've broken the rule already. But this, and second, they broke the rule in 2 ways. This is the second way they broke the rule. What is supposed to happen is that the Portadown physio was given the information and was told to go and tell the Newry team, as is required by rule, that a change has been made. Now, Newry say that they never got the message. Portadown say that he handed the information, or told, not handed, hold the information to a man in a blue Newry jacket in a Newry tie. So when it came to the report, what the IFA panel said was, that's not really good enough, because the man in the blue jacket and the blue tie, he could be a fan, he could be security, he could be a dad of a player, it could be anything. You really need to give it to key member of the Newry changing room, Darren Mullen, or maybe the secretary would maybe be, a better option. On the other side of this, Newry side, we just didn't get this message, so who knows? I don't know what really happened. I'm not even going to guess.
That's new information from where I'm standing, and it's just so.
It is. If you have a lot of time in your hands, right, read the IFA document, because there is quite.
When I originally talked about this a couple of weeks ago, or whatever it was, months ago, I had loads of questions. I was like, was the ref told? It seems like Jamie Robinson was.
The ref was told.
But
that's actually a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because a lot of people will say the referee was told, Jamie Robinson's told, therefore it's fine, and it's Jamie Robinson's fault. That's not how it works, right? So the referee's job is to implement the laws of the game, the FIFA laws, if you like, not to adhere to eligibility rules or things like that, or NIFL rules. This is a NIFL Premiership rule, so it's not Jimmy Robinson's job. It is not his role to implement those rules.
You're absolutely right. I think you're correct to highlight that. So from the information we have, referee was told that seemed to be fine. There's not real clarity over And the onus was on Portadown to make Newry aware of
Yeah.
that. But you also believe from your reading of this that the key moment was when Alberto Balde crossed the white line. If he sat on that bench, because I remember seeing Comet earlier that day and seeing the teams and then not seeing Alberto Balde on the pitch. Was the point where Leo Donnellan starting, was that almost when something had went awry?
No.
It was the moment Alberto was substituted on.
Yeah, because Alberto Balde, I mean, it is questionable before them, but like Alberto Balde coming on, you're playing somebody that you've taken out of the team because they're incapacitated, and now you're bringing them on, so they can't be incapacitated. That is, now I know Niall Curry disagrees with that and believes that you can be incapacitated to the point where you can't start a game and then can come on and feature at the end of the game. You get that, like players yeah, Gaffer, I can give you half an hour today, sort of a thing. And that's I can see that side of things, but that's not how it's been interpreted by either NIFL or by the FA appeals committee. So that's where Portadown slipped up. Those are the two things. The first one is the main one. The second one about the man in the blue coat is quite entertaining. The third part of Portadown's appeal, and this is the one that they had. I don't know if they had the best case on, but it's interesting, and it maybe is something that will make people in NIFL feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's the Thomas McBride case, which is what you were referring to there.
Yeah.
It was the Institute Ards case back in 2019. I remember it very well. I was in the press box reporting for the Newry Arts Chronicle and for the Belfast Telegraph as well. It was beside Michael Clark, who was commentating the game for Radio 4 on the day. And before the game, we had the team sheets, and we're like, there's team sheets. And then we got a message saying Thomas McBride is out of the team. And Michael and I were like, right, okay. Thomas McBride's out of the team. Then in the second half, despite not being on the team sheet, the second team sheet at all, Thomas McBride comes on and plays. And at the time, and then Institute won 3-0. And at the time, I was like, well, that's odd. And we did, and I wrote about it in the Belfast Telegraph that night, and Michael talked about it on Radio 4 at the time. And I don't know if Michael took it any further. I remember that I asked NIFL about it, and essentially they said there's no wrongdoing here. And that's the Belfast Telegraph article he had shared about quite a bit. They, from what I understand, they spoke with the matchday referee, and the matchday referee said there was no wrongdoing as far as he was concerned. Everything was above board. Now, that's not really that's not great, because it's not really the referee's job to say whether or not, as we discussed, that's not the referee's job to implement that sort of thing. So if I'm a Portadown fan, I'd be annoyed about that, because the Institute weren't even investigated into. The thing about it is, NIFL in 2019, I think they got it wrong. If they'd followed the rules, then Institute should have lost that game. It should have been handed to Ards as a 3-0 win. Maybe what crowded it at the time was Ards didn't appeal. That night, Colin Nixon was sacked as Ards manager, and there was a lot of other stuff going on Ards. Like I had pointed out, Michael had pointed it out to the Ards officials who were in the press box at the time. But they weren't interested in appealing it because they didn't think it was the right thing to do, or maybe more importantly, they had other things in their mind, i.e. trying to recruit Warren Feeney. But it didn't go any further. And I think NIFL got it wrong. I think they should have investigated it. The Newry didn't appeal the Portadown case. So it was very, very similar circumstances. So NIFL really should have looked into it. But here's the thing, and Portadown fans would be rightly saying, well, that sets a precedent, so this should be exactly the same. It's not how it works. If NIFL have made a mistake in the past, that doesn't mean that they are duty bound to continue to make that mistake forever. So Institute got away with it and Portadown didn't, and it's no more complicated than that. And I would be annoyed by that if I was a Portadown fan, but that's the reality of it.
One thing that keeps coming up, which I think should be noted, at least from someone in my perspective, is that whoever brought this or highlighted this as a case or made NIFL aware of it is completely irrelevant. It's been bandied about, this frustration, fingers being pointed as if they caused this to happen. It's completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter who the person was. I have no clue who it was. It doesn't really matter. One, that's irrelevant. Two, you were talking about team sheets being changed. That's happened to me. Look, I haven't been covering league and kind of a serious role for a long time, but even in my short year being given team sheets, I've had times where what's been printed out at one, it changes, and you're, oh, okay, scroll them out there playing it, swaps about. So that can happen. It's not like once it's in it, whatever time it is, 2 o'clock, 1:30, that's it set, so that can change.
Well, they change all the time, yeah.
So with that being said, Keith, I think a part that I want to talk to you about, and you can stop me if you want, you reported this late on the Sunday, which when it came out, the win happened, and later on that day,
Like 10 o'clock on Sunday night.
So it came out in the Sunday of the game. I've seen it myself. You have received, as a journalist, a lot of blowback and a lot of abuse online from a variety of accounts and people. I think it was completely uncalled for, clearly. It absolutely crossed the line on numerous occasions that I saw. Can you tell me what your experience has been like with that, and as a journalist, receiving those attacks online?
It's definitely disappointing. You know, it was my dad who spotted me being called the C word by a Portadown fan on Ash League forums, to which I logged on to read it and then read a whole load of other comments. And like, I don't know, if Stephen Beacom was here, CV Denny, they'd probably like brush it off and be like, that's no big deal. But like, I did read it all, and like, it's not nice. It isn't nice. But it's also like, you know, you put things into perspective, and it's not that big a deal. And you know, you have to be like, as a journalist, criticism is valid. So you've got to be ready for that. Abuse is not fair and not valid, but you know, there's a lot of people in football who get a lot worse than that. So I'm not really, you know, I'm not making a massive deal of it at all. And I have no issues with Portadown. I will be there again, I'm sure, at some point in the near future, and I would expect to get a good reception. And I'll certainly, you know, I've dealt with the club and had no issues. So no, there's no like. Yeah, it isn't nice, but it's also not that big a deal. I'm not getting it out of proportions.
But being able to report stories and to sometimes be the one that come out with it first, and being able to sometimes challenge clubs, and not that you were challenging Portadown in this situation, that's a real key part of being a journalist here. And it was a very unique case from what I've seen, where I saw a lot of people all just they threw their frustration with this case towards you as if you were somehow involved, when actually you're completely outside the case. Just because you were the one reporting on it does not make it go away. Yeah, you not reporting on it does not mean it goes away.
No, I know, and that's true. That's the thing. Like, and sometimes, like, you know, newspapers can be a bit guilty of it. We'll chuck in there as exclusively revealed in Belfast Telegraph, and our report led to this. Listen, the reality is, if nobody ever reported on this, it would have still happened. Like, it wouldn't have changed it. It wasn't journalists getting, you know, reporting on the story that pushed it over the line. That's just not reality. You know, like, because we reported on it, Newry didn't have to put in an appeal. If we hadn't reported on it, Newry may have had to put an appeal to start NIFL's investigation, so it might have changed it slightly. But like, let's be real with it. It would have happened anyway. Yeah, like, some of the criticism in the very early days were like, this is a non-story, this is ridiculous, this is so small time, and like, again, going back to what we talked about at the start, like, I understand why people thought that, because it does seem like a really small error, but it was a story. Like, NIFL were investigating, and it became apparent to me pretty quickly that, like, Portadown had something to worry about. So yeah, listen, I've no issue with Portadown or Portadown fans. It's all good as far as I'm concerned. It's just part of the job, and you know, journalists like to break exclusives, and we got that one first, and I reported that first, and was pleased with that. And you know, Mark McIntosh, he was him who he got first this morning with the Portadown's losing the case. So you know, he'll be pleased with that. So this is how it works.
Well, even if this was thrown out and there was no investigation to be had, or Portadown were, you know, the disciplinary committee said nothing to see here, that still did not make the story any more relevant at the time. Quickly on this, that leaves Portadown, unless they want to go to arbitration, which seems unlikely, but we haven't seen. Portadown are 12th. They've been pretty much bottom all season. 5 points. Dungannon are sitting significantly above them. Now Newry are still, 13 points ahead of them. It all but seals their fate, bar big run, really, doesn't it? Not exactly. But it really does put a massive boulder in their way. This would have been a big swing if they got it.
And it makes life very difficult for Portadown, for Al Curry, who's finding himself in a similar situation twice, taking over as Portadown manager when they're they're in difficult spots. Yeah, it's funny actually. This how like I would say when this news first broke back in December, Dungannon were pretty pleased about it. Now they're probably like we'd rather the points came off Newry.
Swept, yeah.
So
I had the same conversation with Dungannon once.
it's funny how these things change, isn't it? Then go back to something. I'm sorry to drag back to what we're talking about. You say like about how whoever broke the story or whoever first spotted it like shouldn't be blamed. That's really important. You've hit on something really important there. Like that is part of a really bad Northern Irish culture, which is essentially touts out, touts get shot. You know what I mean? It's that sort of like mentality of like the problem here is the person who touted, and like that's not how it works because like a rule was broken and more people spotted it, and I didn't wasn't I was kept off about it, but like plenty of people spotted it. It wasn't so. Listen, it's not right, and I think like what's really important from these cases is Portadown or Knockbreda or other clubs who've been caught up in this sort of thing. They can be angry at NIFL. They can be angry at the FA Appeals Committee. They can blame journalists if they want. They can look at the opposition and say the opposition did the wrong thing. But if you do all those things, you blame those four things, you don't learn anything from it. What you got to do is you got to think about like, okay, we do feel hard done by here, but let's accept that we made a mistake and like put practices in place to make sure that we don't make that mistake again. And hopefully Portadown will learn from that. And listen, Peter Hungerford, the chairman, wasn't there that day, and I actually suspect if he had been, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. So there's a lot of unfortunate circumstances in it. There's a broader question actually about whether the punishment fits the crime, and that's a curious thing in actually.
That's what I was thinking. It's a big swing for this, which seems somewhat minor.
Yeah, it's like a really. What you get a lot in Irish league football is that there just isn't really room for leeway in the rules. It's like, well, you've done this, so it's 3-0 and £500 fine or whatever it happens to be. I don't really have an answer for this because if you change the rules and make them more open to allow NIFL or the IFA, more room to do other types of punishment, like just fines or warnings or whatever, rather than giving the 3-0, then you leave yourself open to people, saying there's double standards or whatever, because one thing could be punished one way and another way. This is much cleaner. But other leagues around Europe don't do this to the same extent that we do. So it's something to think about perhaps. But I think maybe what might be good is if we had a bit more administration education. Now there already is, to be fair. Like the IFA run like Comet workshops. They already exist, but
Comet, the system where teams input their players.
That's another one, isn't it? It's like it's all Comet's fault. Comet's not fit for purpose. Comet had literally nothing to do with this case. It was done on Comet, but like it wouldn't have made any difference if it was the pen and paper dice. Maybe more education. It already exists, but let's maybe ramp it up. There's bound to be ways that we can improve the standard of admin in this country because this just happens way too often. I mean, this is the third this season because Warren Point, and nobody noticed, right? Because they lost the game anyway. But Warren Point had a game turned into a 3-0 right at the start of the season. So that's 3 cases in the NIFL senior leagues, and there's one to come in the PIL, so that'll be 4 if that next one guilty.
And let's hit on the Knockbreda one because I want to separate fact from fiction. You read online it was a spelling error where they've now lost the points with a Hegarty. What's the truth here?
Hegarty 1G or 2G, right? It's not. This is about Comet. Now this one is, and the sort of myth that will be put about is, even though I tried quite carefully to explain it in the article I wrote about it, that Knockbreda were punished for a spelling mistake. That's not true. That's not true. Basically, on Comet, there were 2 Kieran Hegartys. Now, it's only one bloke. It's still Kieran Hegarty, the 25-year-old midfielder, ex-Larne Tech Old Boys, like their comrades. But there were 2 accounts for the same player. One with his name spelt incorrectly with 1G, and one with his name spelt correctly with 2Gs. Knockbreda, I guess, in a rush to get the signing through so he could play in the game, they selected the wrong account. And therefore the transfer that he was with Larne Tech Old Boys, that was his previous club, so he actually hadn't transferred from the old club because they used this old account.
Now this feels very like birthday. It is technically a misspelling of his account. Same player history, same name, all but G.
Player history is slightly different, right? Because this count was a ban, not a ban. It was still there to be picked. You can still select it, but it hadn't been updated since 2018. Whereas there's a new one which had been updated since 2018, and Knockbraid secondly picked the wrong account. Then they played them. So you can look at it one way and say, well, that's so small. That's such a small error. That's an honest error. There's no harm intended. So that's a ridiculous decision. Okay, well, the other way of looking at it is, in that game, when Knockbraid had beaten Newton 2-0, they played a guy who's registered to Lauren Old Boys, is still a Lauren Old Boys player, and could have played for Lauren Old Boys the next day, legally. Right? So,
I guess it comes back to that precedent thing. It just says you can't be, regardless how close. This seems so close, and a mistake I feel like all of us could see ourselves making. You look at it and go, you can't just say, well, you were close and this is frustrating. But like when Linfield picked the wrong John Smith, it's like, well, what can you do about it? So again, 3 points feels very harsh here, but I'm not the board.
And this is the thing where I maybe went down to before, could we have like other punishments there? But, he was ineligible for that game because he was a Lauren Old Boys player. There was a Lauren Old Boys player on the field. So I feel really sorry for Knockbraid with it, and I feel sorry for Portadown as well. And it's curious, and sometimes these sort of things, people go like, oh, there's the pen pushers, there's media, there's the rules nerds who all don't understand football, and real proper football men know how it really works, but like, you do actually need rules to like have football. You need there needs to be a framework there to allow things to happen in a fair way. So it's not much fun, really, is it?
Again, the way this goes away is by stop doing it. Everyone's learnt a lesson throughout the league now from both these two cases. Hopefully we'll never talk about something similar to this again, but we just know how the Irish League is. Until next time.
Until next week.
I'm going to tell you a record, Keith, and you're going to have to tell me who it is. 197, drew 31, lost 43, a win ratio of 57% as a manager. Who am I talking about?
Is it me on Football Manager?
Oh, come on. I know you have a far higher win ratio than that. Taking odds to the Champions League and the new Super League with, I don't know, Borussia Dortmund and Verona. It was, of course, the managerial record of former Glentoran boss
Mick McDermott.
Mick McDermott. Yeah. Thank you, Marshall Gillespie, for that. He put that out online. Last week was very much the preview, the prelude to him stepping away. We didn't get there. He nicked in just before we were able to talk about it. So you can listen back to the history somewhat of Mick McDermott joining Glentoran and then now stepping away from the sideline. I didn't think he was going to do it. Were you surprised when he stepped away and gave Rodney McAree a go at the hot seat there in East Belfast?
Yes and no. I mean, there was that kind of feeling. I think most people thought, which is what you're getting at, that he was just going to hang in there and he didn't really care and he was going to ride out the criticism. But Mick McDermott's human. I've spent a bit of time with him. He's made a fair amount of mistakes since time in Portadown. I think he's taken on battles and arguments with people that were unnecessary, and I think some of those have come back to haunt him. I also don't think he's like an absolutely dreadful person by any shape of the imagination. I think he's more.
He's one of the few panto villains in this league, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And he brought that on himself by like steaming in the arguments that he didn't need to steam into. My favourite one of them, like there's arguments with the County Antrim FA over what a Shield final will be on, and there's that one where remember he went off and around about how the Irish League would be. Was it Mickey Mouse, he said, if we played at the same time as the World Cup? I mean, that was just wrong, right? Because we played at the same time as the World Cup and it was completely fine. I mean, maybe we missed a wee bit of like Holland and USA that time, but it was all right. And he obviously wanted to go to the World Cup because he did anyway. So yeah, there's all sorts of kind of funny, quirky things like that. But yeah, I also like I don't really use the worst book in the world, but like, was I surprised he went at the end? No, because like that. The criticism he was getting, the car park protest, it was a peaceful protest or a non-violent protest outside it, but still, pretty intimidating. We talked a little bit about abuse and like I got a wee bit from Portadown fans. I mean, I didn't like that. what he got was 10 million times worse. So that no matter how much of a front he put on, like that must have hurt. He put a lot of time in the Glentoran, and you're Glentoran fan. If you're Glentoran fan, you may disagree with absolutely everything he said, but he still put a lot of effort into it. I'm sure it hurt him.
Rodney McAree is somewhat the continuity candidate there. He was a part of the club and being a part of the behind the scenes there. He's stepping in after being a manager for both Coleraine and Dungannon Swifts. This is a big opportunity for him.
Yeah, it is a big opportunity for him. I mean, he did a great job with Dungannon. He worked really hard. He's an impressive guy. He's famed for being a good coach, and I mean that on the technical side of things and putting on great sessions. Most people in football would tell you that. Didn't really work for him at Coleraine. It wasn't a complete disaster. They were pretty close to qualifying for Europe. They weren't.
But he was in the shadow
there. They weren't Kearney Spector hung over the whole thing, because there was always that sense that like Oran had left with Scotland, but there was always a possibility he might leave. Rodney had the same backroom staff as what Oran had, so then it was really easy for Coleraine to just get rid of him and bring Oran back in when everything happened the way it did. And he probably he was a bit unfortunate there. The circumstances weren't ideal. I think it was really important that he brought in his own coach here at Glentoran, and he's done that and bring in John Gregan. That's a really important step. So that's great for him. I mean, I think he could do a good job. I think he is capable of winning the league. I don't think this season. I suspect that it's maybe too far. It's not too far gone on paper, but I think like it would just be a big effort. Other teams have the momentum, but I mean, I definitely think he's capable of winning the league in the future. There, the big question everybody asks is like, is he really picking the team? And like, to be honest, I don't. I have no doubt that he will have free reign. Like McDermott is still on the board, as is Paul Miller, and I've no doubt they will have their say and they will tip in. But I think Rodney will have learned a lot from that Coleraine experience, and he'll want control of things. So I don't think he would have taken the job if he thought that there was somebody else knocking the door saying, "Here, you're not playing him left back." So I don't think that's the way it'll work.
Will he be forgiven coming at this time and not getting Europe? I discussed last week with Matthew Brown from Shout at the Oval podcast about how not qualifying for Europe a second season in a row is a disaster for a club like Glentoran. Has this spell been so damaging that ultimately, if it doesn't happen, they don't get into Europe this year, he, at least McAree I'm talking about, will be forgiven for that? Or has he got to deliver now?
I think he should be forgiven for it. I certainly don't think like it should be a case of if they finish fourth and go out in the semi-finals of the Irish Cup or whatever, he should be sacked. Like I think that would be really unfair, because he's inheriting a team that in a really difficult situation where they're on a really bad run and morale's low, and I think he's a great chance qualifying for Europe, and that should, like, that's a realistic aim for him between now and the end of the season, but it shouldn't be like a sacking matter if they don't do it. If it, you gotta give them. I always think you gotta give managers like at least a year, and you gotta give them 2 transfer windows, absolute minimum. So yeah, you got to give the man a bit of time. It's a curious thing. Glentoran's setup under Ali Poor has always been curious, and the biggest thing that people will talk a lot about what really went wrong for Mick McDermott was the results, and that Glentoran fans, I'll let Glentoran fans argue over whether the results were good enough or not. Like, my problem with it always was like, it is inherently wrong for somebody to be a manager and also be on the board. Like, the whole purpose of a board is, at a football level, Irish League level, is to hold the managerial team to account. I don't see how it was ever possible for the management team to be held to account when both the manager and the assistant manager on the board. It's just not good governance. So I think it's a good thing that era has come to an end. And Paul Miller was assistant manager, he's now just on the board, so I think it's a move in the right direction for Glentoran.
Many traditions in this league, none will feel more nostalgic for me, quite like the Joe Gormley to Glentoran rumour. It came round again, but it's irrelevant. He signed a new deal with Cliftonville. Was that ever in the offing again? Was there a time where it could have happened over the past few years? It's probably not going to happen now, but just to see that come around again kind of warmed the cockles of my heart slightly.
Yeah, I talked to Paddy McLaughlin about this after the Dundee Cup win, and like he was pretty confident Joe was staying, no doubt about it in his mind. And I think that probably was the case. You know, Joe's a good player, well, one of the greatest Arctic strikers ever. He's nobody's full either. I think that like interest from other clubs, articles in the paper, probably does him no harm. He was very close to signing for Crusaders a few years before that, but you know he can use those sort of talking to other clubs and rumours or whatever to maybe try and get a better contract with the Reds. Whatever, he's worth it. Man's brilliant. Man's an absolute legend. Every club wants a Joe Gormley. And when I say that, I don't just mean Joe Gormley, right? Well, every club wants that guy who is not only brilliant at football, not only scores loads of goals, but stays at your club for years and years and years. Jordan Owens is another example. Like, those guys are so rare in football. And so what if they get a good contract? They're worth it. Jimmy Mulgrew signed a new contract today.
I saw that. It's a part of a bigger trend that I feel we're seeing in the league recently of players continuing to play on in what would be considered the twilight of their career. Do you think that's the professionalism coming in where now football is such a bigger part of their life? Could you imagine giving up your career at 34? It's like, I'm still ready to go. I'm still going to keep going. And perhaps the professionalism of the league recently, knowledge when it comes to nutrition and fitness and all that type of stuff means that we are seeing what we've seen in the conference and lower ends of English football for a long time, where players are playing into a lot later time in their 30s.
I mean, maybe, right? But like, this is my generation, right? Joe Gormley and Colin Coates and Jimmy Mulgrew and all those guys. Like, I'm from that same era, and like, I feel like we were definitely pre-nutrition. We obviously weren't, right? But it's like it wasn't as big a thing in 2004 when those sort of guys were coming out school.
Yeah, the league was what this podcast was. It was
rough
and ready.
I mean, all those guys were like in the box or whatever on a Saturday night, 2005. So I mean, I think it's a miracle that any of them are still playing fair play to them. They came through a different era of nights out and kebabs and stuff. So.
Well, Keith, sometimes a bloke turns 31 and it's either it's over or they're hitting the gym hard. I've seen it, sometimes it goes one way or the other.
Yeah, no, listen, those guys, I think why those guys still play on, I think they're great competitors because they have a real passion for our game because they're fantastic players and clubs want to keep them. I think that's why they keep them. I think there's players like that in every generation, but that's a special generation. The Coates, Mulgrew, Gormley, those guys, a lot of respect for them. They're great ambassadors for our game. They're still guys that they're guys that people in the street know who maybe only see Irish League TV on Newsline for 2 minutes a week. They're the names they know.
And they've been winners in the past. I have to jump to this. It really stood out to me when I saw it come out. You're a man that spends a fair bit of time following the championship. Johnny McMurray goes from Crusaders. He was transfer listed with them to Warmpoint. He returns to Warmpoint in the championship for an undisclosed fee. That knocked my socks off when I saw it. Is this a case of just he wants a new home? Is this shows the commitment to Warmpoint are making to, Barry Gray said, not be playing in cowsheds anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a common for Barry Gray. I like Barry Gray. He's got like a good turn of phrase and he's always an entertaining interview. I spoke with him on Saturday. I don't know if in this, some of the facilities in the championship are poor. He's got a point. I don't think Warmpoint is that salubrious, but, listen, that Johnny Murray, why is he signed for Warmpoint? Well, they paid a transfer fee for him and I'm sure they probably give him a decent wage. It's a 2.5-year deal. It's very much a case of he's a quality player. He will score the goals to get them up and then he will maybe be the man to score the goals to keep them up. And Warmpoint are really well placed, by the way.
It's on the cards now.
Last time I was on the show, August, I was really blown away by Loughgall, and I was, and they were fantastic. And they have slipped back from that level, and now Warmpoint are the team that are coming through. And Anna are there too, as well, and they're part of it, absolutely no doubt about it. Gun to my head, if I had to pick a team to win the championship right now, I'd say Warmpoint. I saw them on Saturday. An absolutely insane game, which was more like a game of ice hockey than it was a game of football. I watched Warmpoint beat Ards 5-3, and
Barry
Like
Flynn ran out of adjectives. He was.
he did, and that is a man who has many adjectives up his sleeve. It was just a great game of football. Warren were brilliant. Like they deserved to win it. Stephen Ball left back. Oh, brilliant player. And somebody
Absolutely underrated. He was one of. I'm so surprised he didn't.
Yeah, it's strange he's not in the Premiership now. He should. And they played really good football and they were worth it. Like Ards' defending at times wasn't the best. Yeah, no, at one point our team who are moving on up the table. So are the Welders, but then they had just too bit of a slow start there to get involved.
Yeah. Well, a team was at the top, sitting pretty, and it's all starting to get a bit shaky for them potentially in the Championship. They've now lost potentially their best striker, Nedis Makalitis, going to Carrick in January.
Yeah,
that seems like a bold move on both parties' sides.
Yeah, I had a good chat with Dean Smith, the local manager, off the back of their defeat to the Welders on New Year's Day, and he was very much. I said to him, like, your job in January is keeping the squad together. He's like, yeah, and we can do that because our players are pro. So that's a very. When I say pro, I don't mean full-time pro. I just mean they are professional players and they get paid some way to play football. So the majority of players in the Championship are registered as amateurs. And what that means is a Premiership, well, any club can come in and just take your players. We've seen it, like Portadown signed Dundela, right? So like Dundela have lost a lot of players and will not get any money from them. Loughgall, on the other hand, signed their players pro. 1 point to it as well. Arts do it. And then some clubs are like mixed, where half are pro and half are amateur. But it's quite important. But it's interesting in the case of Maculitis that what Dean Smith said to me was, if anybody wants our players, you're going to have to pay for them. So Carrick did. Carrick coughed up for Nedis. Interesting to see how he does. He had a really good first half of the season. I think though that like Loughgall, they went and signed Keelan Loughran at the back of that, and they maybe would have felt at that point that what they actually needed more was a centre back, because in centre forwards, there's like Sahoy there, and there's other. They brought Aaron Duke in, who's kind of a proven goal scorer from the Mid-Ulster League area, or the Mid-Ulster area. So I guess they figured that
Would there be any question of that club going up? I still remember teams coming up from the Championship very much the case of, will they go for the licence? Loughgall this time round, if they were to finish first, would there be any doubts over them going for their licence, and would Lakeview qualify as a Premiership ground? Because I know Anna United's wasn't going to qualify for various reasons to be a Championship ground. That's why there's all this talk of them going Coleraine if they beat Portadown in the playoff. Could Lakeview Park be a place which could see Premiership football if they qualified this season?
Right, so I think the days of teams not going up because they don't have licenses is over, because what teams do nowadays is they will arrange a loan with somewhere. So they'll say, you actually mentioned Anna won the Coleraine, which seemed like mad because of the distance involved, but entirely possible that you arrange a temporary move. Then you move to that ground, you play however long it takes. Could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 years. And at the same time, you try and upgrade your ground, get it up to Premiership standard, so you can eventually move back. Allen's ground isn't good enough. 1 point is Loughgall. I think Lakeview has hosted Premiership football before, but the standards have gone up since then, and Loughgall hasn't improved. So I think that they would need a share, but they probably wouldn't be as far away from it as what Anna would be. So it would maybe be like a temporary share and then get a bit of work done and change things and come back to Lakeview eventually. Good bit to go on all those things though.
Most of the stuff that went down this week very much happened off the pitch. There is a brand new GM of Linfield. His name is David Graham. He is the former head of communications for Rangers. He replaces Pat Fenlon, who returns to the League of Ireland. Of course, he had a brilliant managerial career. Looking back on his time in that role with Linfield, he was the person that helped guide Linfield, that transition into a full-time club. What kind of legacy does he leave in South Belfast?
I mean, a positive one. He's overseen the transition to full-time professionalism and the transition, a period of upheaval with changes to the stadium and whatever. I think it's hard to judge a GM really, I guess. But like, I think Linfield have obviously enjoyed a really good run with so many league titles in the last few years with David Haley and then popped in there as general manager. So yeah, you have to say he has done a good job. Like anything, it is kind of hard to judge these things sometimes. Um, David Graham comes in, obviously experienced. He was DEP councillor and he was also head of media at Rangers. And you could see like he was a slick operator. Was at the press conference and he has that look about him of a man who's got the final three on The Apprentice. He kind of has that kind of like slick look going on. But he spoke well. He had a few sound bites lined up about fixing the roof while the sun shines and stuff. And with the media, we talked about a few things with him. We talked about the possibility of summer football, and he, without really nailing his colours to the mask, he was in favour of it, and he wants to encourage more professionalism at Linfield and improve areas of the club. So yeah, it was relatively interesting for what it was.
I met him on Saturday. I agree, very much a impressive presence. He gave a stormer of an interview on Sports Sound there on Saturday, where he kind of did the greatest hits of Irish League topics. Pretty much, he started with the pitch at Windsor, and I was there covering the game, and I must say, not to be hyperbolic, but it really was in poor nick. It didn't have the same coloration that you saw at Newry if you look back at the highlights from that game. But I mean, the middle third, it was, I described it as deer on ice. It was just slipping and sliding everywhere. We've seen that David Haley has criticised the state of the pitch. What's the standoff here in regards to it? Is this the IFA's role to sort this pitch out? Is the onus on Linfield? Who needs to step up here?
It's the IFA's ground, essentially, and it's their job to fix it, and it's very much in their interest to do it because like Northern Ireland need to play on it as well, and it doesn't reflect well on the IFA if Windsor Park isn't up to scratch for internationals. Michael O'Neill certainly wouldn't be happy about it. And like the IFA held the Super Cup quite recently and would like to get more big events like that again. You're not going to get them if your pitch is the way it is. So yeah, it's something that needs to be improved. I can understand why David Haley's annoyed about it. It seems I don't know a lot about ground maintenance, so I don't know what the particular issue is, the specific issue is, but like it looks poor when compared to other grounds even in the Belfast area that are grass pitches. You go to somewhere like Dundela, Wilger Park, and it's it's a great surface, and you see a big club like Linfield with cow patch that doesn't really run right. So there's obviously issues there. I don't know what it is, but hopefully they can get it sorted because you don't want that for the internationals.
He described summer football as a no-brainer and highlighted Shamrock Rovers. Now they had a number of games before they qualified for Europe this year. We'll not go down that path. He said he wasn't against Sundays. Clearly Linfield have played a lot of games there. Wasn't as forthright and as jubilant about that idea. On plastic pitches, he said it wasn't a fan due to potential risk of injury, but said, look, he understands why places have them. He was very critical of the standard of refereeing here. It's hard to get into that sometimes because I see a lot of fans criticizing referees and it feels like you're criticizing something not going your way. I think we all have our preferred referee, but if we were to say, look at this as an issue and want to improve refereeing, what way is that? Because there isn't a lot of full-time referees about in global football, really, is there? There's some at the top end, maybe, but how do we improve this?
There was a suggestion of that meeting, the press conference, the Linfield press conference, that maybe maybe there could be full-time referees in the Irish League. Like, that's mad. Like, how's that going to happen? Where's the money come from for that? I've absolutely no idea. Like, there's not enough coming. There's not enough to fund that. I don't have no clue where the money would come to do that. I think you've got to help referees. There's no point. Like, there's a lot of like the narrative around this is quite often it's pretty childish. It's pretty infantile. It's like, oh, these guys are all rubbish, get rid of them all, like there's not that many referees in Northern Ireland. People are not queuing up to sign up to become referees, and when they do sign up, like they get so much criticism, some really nasty, scary stuff at grassroots park level that they walk away from the game at a young age. So like you got the guys who are in the middle at Irish League games. Those guys should be respected because they have worked really hard to get there. They have taken an awful lot of rubbish to get to that point. Now that doesn't mean that they can't improve, that they can't get better. But I think we should respect the people that are there. Let's accept that they're going to make mistakes. Let's probably be mature enough to accept that quite often when we're shouting about what terrible mistake that they've made, that we are completely biased. Like, as when I say we, I mean as in the fans. So yeah, let's be a bit more mature about it. I think like how can they improve? Um, that's maybe how can we let's have more contact time, maybe more training, more like video analysis, more build up all that sort of stuff. To give them better experiences. Feedback, I think, is really crucial for referees. That's what all referees tell me. So, build that sort of thing up. That already exists, but ramp it up a level, if we can. Let's work with the guys we've got to make them better, rather than like just being childish about it.
Just as we to wrap up this section here, he did comment on the Shield final there, of course, which Larne won on penalties. He criticised there was no ambulance there. Obviously, there was significant injury to David Walsh, the Linfield goalkeeper. He is now out. Seems to be on the mend there. That was a strange situation there, where both teams decided to go straight to penalties. Was there expected to be, if they played that on, to be extra time? Or I've never seen that.
First thing, right? There was an ambulance there. There was an ambulance there. It was Ambutron with her is the name of the company, right? There's an issue with this where with these companies the ambulance didn't leave to go to the hospital, because if they leave and go to the hospital, then there is no medical cover at the ground in case somebody takes ill within the stadium, whether that be a player or a fan. So there actually was an ambulance. It just didn't leave and didn't take David Walsh to the hospital, which I find hard to understand. I would feel like you deal with the medical emergency that's in front of you, but that's the way it is apparently. So that seems crazy to me. But there was an ambulance there. As for the issue where they went through the penalties, now the County Ireland Shield rules are there is no extra time. They ditched that, well, maybe I think for the COVID season, and they just kept it in. So like that was the way it was meant to be. What happened was there was due to be Linfield had a free kick down by the corner flag touchline area. And I think Shane Andrews said there was about a minute left to play. And because the players had been taken off the pitch, the teams, Tiernan Lynch and David Haley, like agreed among themselves that with the County Anthem's approval and Shane Andrews' approval, that they would just go straight to penalties, because the players have been off the pitch for a while, so they would have to do like a warm up and stuff, and it would have just got a bit messy. And it was probably like Linfield who sacrificed the most out of that, because they had the attacking free kick. So I actually thought it was a rare outbreak of common sense that went straight to penalties, and it turned out to be an entertaining penalty shootout. It was actually really important at the time that they didn't, because there was another suggestion that they should share the shield, which one I think was a terrible idea anyway. But like actually, if the game had been abandoned for either a replay or to share the shield, then everybody would have left, and David Walsh had to get to the hospital in the ambulance. So it was actually important to have the penalty shootout to keep everybody in the ground. So to let David get away. So there you go.
Keith, slightly different this week. We didn't get into much of the games, but just to quickly highlight some of the big moments from the weekend. Clearly the winners were Linfield from the fixtures that went ahead. 3-0 win against Ballymena. Really dispatched them with ease. The other games could have been fireworks. There's some fireworks to a certain extent. 2 draws in Crusaders Larne and Coleraine Cliftonville. What was the big thing that stood out to you? What was it? Coleraine coming back and getting the draw after mistakes from their keeper, or what was the big headline moment you think from that weekend?
Win for Glentoran was big. Win for Rodney McAree. What a goal! What a chip! Unbelievable! Brilliantly captured by David Kerr from NIFL. I really like that camera angle.
At Steve Maguire has conceded that goal. He's conceded the big
Yeah,
Greg Murhouse goal. There
yeah.
was the Forsyth goal. He's on an unwanted highlight reel this season.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, there's going to be we always have the football writers. Sorry, the NI football awards. We do the goal season competition. We show like a reel. There's also like a reel of great goals from the season, and Stephen Maguire's bake's going to be all over it. Yeah, that was a very good goal. I Korean coming back. I mean, listen, I've only seen the highlights and read a few reports in the papers. It seems as if Cliff Mulroney should have won that. That's a slip up on their report, but great fine spur from Korean. Fair play to them. They came back to get a point. Comfortable win for Linfield. They look good. Vertainen, I wasn't really sure about him at the start, but he's scoring goals for fun now, and he seems to be getting better and better. So yeah, it's shaping up. Crusaders did well, didn't they? Right? Remember how Larne absolutely annihilated Crusaders at Inver Park like not that many weeks ago. Crusaders went there, played quite a defensive shape. I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you need to get a result away from home, maybe that's a Northern Ireland fan in me. Went to the job, got a good point. So it's all shaping up pretty interesting at the top. I haven't a clue who's going to win it. It's just, and isn't that great? That's a good thing.
It really is. 5 teams in there. Korean's the one coming up from behind, and it really could go any way. Lauren have a game in hand. Cliftonville currently sitting top with 50. Keith, it's been an absolute pleasure to go through all the news, picking out random stories from here and there this week. Thank you very much for that. Where can people find stuff from you? Twitter's the best place, or get some ink on their hands and get the bell tell?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, search my name. But yeah, I mean, over in the Belfast Telegraph, we have like a massive amount of Irish League coverage. It's several stories every day, fresh stories. From like myself and Graham Mooney and Stephen Beacom. We're working really hard to put together what I think is the best Irish League coverage in the game. So there's my plug.
It's the first place I go to check that I have not missed anything, and usually some weeks I do. Keith, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Keith. It's just me right now. We had a little window to chat with Keith, and there was so much news. I just thought, let's get into all the stuff that was happening this week. I had pages and pages of script stuff to get into, but if you were at a game or you're looking forward to some of the games that are coming down over the next week, well, hey, let's see if I can riff and do this solo for a couple of minutes. We'll see how it all goes. I was at Windsor Park for the 3-0 win over Ballymena, and for Linfield, of course, and I just thought that Ballymena came into that game. I said that they had like a real deep defensive line. It wasn't really clear what formation had been set out from David Jeffrey, and it was clearly trying to stop Linfield, get the early goal, and try and counter on them, which I can imagine that plenty of teams have done when they go to Windsor. It's a really long time, though, for Ballymena since they've got any kind of result in the league at Windsor Park. I believe that they didn't score at all against Linfield this season, and it didn't really look like they were going to score at all. The headline clearly is Itu Vertainen getting a hat-trick against them. He took all his goals really well, but the interesting stat there is that Itu's only scored, he's got 12 in total in the league, but he's only scored 1 goal against the top 6 side. And I know when you listen to me, you're like, why does he keep harping on about top 6 versus bottom 6? And that's because I think it's such a clear indicator of who is going to eventually go for the title. And yes, everyone's expecting Linfield to do what they usually do and keep things tight and then go on a big charge to end the season as other teams fall out. But right now, for me, Linfield need to start getting results against the big teams. They have to play the big teams to get them moving forward, so I'm not criticising they can only win the game that they have in front of them. But right now, they're a team I'm going to look at closely, not only because they're near the top of the league, but because they are a team that need to step up in the big games, because there's going to be a lot of big games. And so far, it hasn't really gone their way. I did a little table a few weeks ago, and Linfield were at the bottom of that, and that was mainly due to draws. And I talked about last week about how Larne and Crusaders, Cliftonville versus Coleraine, about how it was opportunities for Cliftonville and for Larne to push back this charge from Crusaders and Coleraine and get a bit of a gap between them. And ultimately, that didn't happen. It seemed like a real turgid affair between Larne and Crusaders, both teams that didn't really want to lose the game and didn't have enough to penetrate the other to win it. Of course, Cliftonville took a brilliant 2-0 lead against Coleraine. You've got to feel for Gallagher in the Coleraine goal. He's had a run of games for Coleraine, and Oran Kearney went with him. He started with him in one of their biggest games of the season, and no doubt he'd feel gutted for, I guess you would say, mistakes, but it's an odd bounce. He doesn't handle it well. He wasn't throwing into the net. His footing isn't exactly brilliant to be able to block and save the corner that goes right in. But look, perhaps that's what Coleraine needed, a warning shot now for the rest of the season. They know they came into that game nervous, not wanting to lose it, but when the chips were down and they knew they had to come back and fight their way to get into that game, they stepped up. There's a bit of scuffles on the pitch. No point getting into all that fisticuff nonsense, but it's a big result for Coleraine. It would have been even bigger for them to win that and push on, but what that result gives them, it means that they aren't out of it, and that's really a key aspect of that. And for a team like Dungannon, they'll hope that win against Glenavon helps them get out of this lower part of the season. Dungannon are like, I think I've said this before, they're the bottom half Crusaders. They're getting results at home. They're not getting lots of results at home. That's why they're 11th in the league. But recently, it's all starting to come together for them at home. They got a result against Newry there on Boxing Day. They've now got a result against a Glenavon side who pull a goal back when it's 1-0 to make it 1-1 with a great goal from Prendergast. But Dungannon Swifts show a bit of fight and they get a huge 3 points at home. And how vital could that be towards the end of the season, especially now with Portadown not getting those 3 points back from Newry. Newry put up their own fight against Glentoran at home. This is a game that was first called off on the Friday night. These are two teams that need to get their games happening. They need to get going. They can't have any more games in hand. And Rodney Macquarie makes a winning start to life as manager of Glentoran. 3-1. It all got a bit nervy for the Glens when it's 2-1 and they're down a player due to a last man tackle and a red card. But they stand tall. That red card, of course, for Patrick McLean. But they are able to deal with the last, 30 minutes, 35 minutes of the game. They even get a goal. Jay Donnelly get a second one 3 minutes later. Newry are in a position now where it's just about holding off Portadown and trying to stay in front of the Dungannon Swifts. They're not in a great run of form. They're playing a lot better in these games than the results really dictate. But it's all about results, isn't it? And right now, Newry are shy of getting any big results at the minute. It's 5 in a row if you look at the form table. But that was last week. Let's briefly look ahead to what's coming up this weekend. Weather pending, of course. There's so many. If you're listening this on Tuesday, there's a whole row of games from Ballymena and Newry. That's a massive game there for Newry. Ballymena is the type of team where they'll hope to try and get some points, particularly Ballymena coming off such a limp performance against Linfield, but at home they can be a different animal. Coleraine host Carrick Rangers. Nothing but 3 points for Coleraine there will do in their attempt to move up the table and be within shooting distance of a title challenge. Crusaders Linfield, what a huge game. Linfield, like I said, are not the type of team that come into the top 6 and really do the business that they can dispatch and put them out of reach. It screams a draw only because that's the type of result we've seen from Linfield in these games. And perhaps at home, though, Crusaders can do what they've done continuously over and over again this season and get the result. They got a great result against Linfield earlier in the season at home. Can they do that again? They'll almost need to if they also want to keep close to that chasing pack. Clifton will go to Glenavon. What can you say? What can you say about Glenavon when they go from these amazing results? I've said this so many times. It's like the cliche of this podcast. They're brilliant and then they're not. They are clearly better at home. It feels a lot of the times, but they were able to deal the first loss to Glentoran, and they've got other great results against Crusaders at home this season. Regardless of their poor losses against Dungannon and a thumping at the hands of Linfield, Cliftonville will be cautious. It's a busy week for them, and I'm just not even going to put my neck on the line there. And Glentoran host Dungannon Swifts. A lot closer when these two teams met at the Oval than some people would have you believe. And look, Dungannon could come into this. It's not like they're getting great results away from home, but they could get into this and take on a slightly wounded Glentoran. They're not out of this yet. They're finding themselves after that win against Newry. Now with McGinn settling in, they've got McCartan back. They'll of course be without McLean after that red card, and it doesn't get any easier. It's such a tough week for Portadown. Not only are they told, guess what? You're not getting those 3 points back against key relegation rivals in Newry, but they've got to go away to Larne. But maybe Larne are slightly wounded, feels over the top, but they can maybe be got at. It would be an incredible shock if Portadown were to get anything from that game. But if there is a time of the season to get anything at Inver against Larne, it's now not the time. Portadown rested after not playing a game this weekend past. They go up, bit between their teeth, angry. Could frustration be the key to 1 or 3 points at Inver Park? It'd be incredible if it would be, but Portadown have to show us that they have any sort of guile this year. They haven't really proved that at all. Yes, there's been big improvements under Niall Curry, but I think Portadown fans would take a point in any of these games, but it doesn't look likely because they've got Linfield on Saturday at Shamrock Park. Linfield will of course be off the back of their game against Crusaders. That would be an incredible result if they were to do anything at Shamrock Park. They were able to restrict Linfield for a long time earlier in the season. They'll try and hang on for as long as possible on that Shamrock Park pitch, and that's the way to attack Linfield right now. Hold them back, don't get too deep, and don't let them overrun you. But ultimately, sometimes Linfield just turn that screw. They have a certain amount of patience, but do they have the key to unlock them? Perhaps with Joel Cooper returning from suspension, he could do what he did last time at Shamrock Park and get the win for the Blues. Coleraine go to a tough place on Saturday at 3 o'clock, Stagmore Park. But these are the type of games you need to go to if you are going to challenge for the title. This is a big week for Coleraine. It feels like for them, they've got to get 6 or they are shooting themselves in the foot. Tough game there. Cliftonville host Ballymena, and also Carrick Rangers host Glenavon. That Carrick Glenavon game is a bit like a battle for 7th as it continues on. Neither of those teams are out of it just yet. Cliftonville feel very strong going into that Ballymena game, don't they? They look sharp, they look hungry, they look ferocious. We keep talking about the Hale brothers, the Sean Moore, Joe Gormley, plenty of attacking talent, and Ballymena are down a lot of players. They've sold a lot of players. They were changing their team up a lot. David Jeffrey has to turn that team around. Will he do it? Solitude is not the type of place which feels conducive to doing that. Guys, you've made it all the way here to the end. Thank you very much for listening in. I feel like I should do my big silly outro, but I don't need to because I've had a wee monologue talking about all those games. If you've liked this, please do follow me for more insight, more chat. Big place to do that is Twitter, or you can do it on Instagram, or you can do it on Facebook. It's all at Kicking Match. You just type in Kicking Match. It should be good. Of course, if you're one of my crew, one of my smart speaker collective, you know how to join it. You can't just say Kick a Match. You got to say, hey, smart speaker, please play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. Thank you very much. Another cracker in my eyes. All the best. Let's hope Jack Frost dilly dollies away. Godspeed. Until next week, I'll see you again very soon.